All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for connecting with us today. And this is a very, very special day for us because this is the first night of our study of the books and works of Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. I know it's a little bit late here for us in the East Coast, but I hope my friends all over the world have a chance to join us and also see this afterwards. Right, this call is going to be available for you guys to see it after. So I'm really thrilled and I'm honored to be talking about the works of someone who has contributed and is still contributing so much, not only for us in Spiritism specifically, but for everyone, right? Because as we're going to see in his books, his work is really incredibly important and powerful for us to understand, a little bit about obsession, mediumship, and the works of so many spiritual friends that come and help us, right, on a regular basis. And I'm your host. I'm Marco Magalhaes. And for those who don't know me, it's a little bit of introduction. I'm from Toronto and I'm on the Toronto Spiritist Society. And you'll be seeing this either through Kardec Radio or to Toronto Spirit Society every Monday at 10 p.m. Okay. All right, everyone. Before we get started, I'm just gonna have a little bit of a prayer, right? So we can kind of connect, right, to this special moment. So if you're there with me, I would ask you to close your eyes and focus on this beautiful, nice energy that flows from above, from our Father, Mother God, our Creator, from our Master Jesus, and all the spiritual friends that assist us on a daily basis. May God allow us to have this moment of sharing knowledge, understanding, and growth. And may we continue this forever and ever in this pathway of transition, of growth that we're constantly going through. Thank you, God, for this opportunity, and so be it. All right, everyone. So, without further delays, today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite books, and you guys have it right here. Rivaldo Franco wrote this book, The Spirit Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. And we're going to start with Planetary Transition. Although, as you can see, there's actually many, many other books lined up for us to see. And if you want to interact with me, I have the chat here in front of me. You guys can type in any questions and comments. And it will be even more interesting if you guys have a chance to read the chapters before so we can have a more dynamic discussion, right? And for those of you who are connecting now, again, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you guys enjoy this book study that we're going to be doing on a regular basis. Okay, so a big hi to everyone there that's joining us now. All right. Okay, everyone. So before we get started, I think it's our first day. Why not? We talk about Manoel Philomeno, right? And it's important for us to know a little bit about the history, right, and why we're doing this, right? Um, so as you can see here, Manuel Filomeno Batista de Miranda, right, was born in 1870, and he was born in a very small place, a remote place in Bahia, in the state of Brazil, um, and in a place called Jangada, which is part of the town of Conde, right, Bahia. He graduated from school, from university with a bachelor's degree, and that was in 1910. And he graduated in a bachelor degree of administration, commerce, and finance. It would be like an administration baccalaureate degree, and he worked for his whole life as his profession as in the same area. He also worked, invited by Giuseppe Piccinga, which is a very famous medium that worked also in the state of Bahia around the same time. He was invited to join the Bahia Spiritist Federation, and he basically started in Spiritism, um, similar to almost all of us, right? He started um, um, due to some challenges, right? And in this particular case, He had a health problem. He has visited many doctors, and he was not able to get much help until he found medium Saturnino Favila at the time that actually, through a lot of work, he realized that was part of an obsession, and he was treated, and he was cured, right? The disease process that he was going through, right? And then after that, he not only took a leadership role in the Spiritist movement at the time in Bahia, but also was particularly focused on understanding mediumship, understanding obsession, disobsession, and also helping many other Spiritist centers learn and practice, right, mediumship. And that was really like an integral part to development of Spiritism Bahia at that time, with the help also of José Pitichinga, right? He started the group Fraternidade, right, in Bahia too. And he has lived his whole life, right, dedicated tirelessly, right, to Spiritism, right? Let me just put a quote here. Just put a little note for everyone. If you guys want to have any comments, I just put a little note for you guys just to see the chat is active. Okay. All right. So what else? Now, so another important thing is, like, how does that happen, right? How does Manoel Philomeno de Miranda um, becomes the author that we know right now? And that's a very interesting story. So the story tells that in 1950, Manuel writes a message via Chico Xavier, right, addressed to Divaldo. And that was the very first contact between Divaldo, right, the medium, and the spirit Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. And at that time, he was already working in the spiritual world through many groups of assistants, right? And the message, particularly for, I think, based on the evidence that we have available, of course, right, that was almost like an introduction, right, at that time. And then in 1970, Manoel Philomeno de Miranda introduced himself as specifically now to Divaldo as a worker in the area of disobsession. And he was actually studying and working in the obsession in the spiritual world. So he presented himself to Divaldo now directly. And now basically that relationship starts to develop, right? He was invited by Joana de Angelis, right, to contribute to that particular type of study. So that's why all the work we're going to be doing on Monday nights is going to be focused primarily on mediumship, spiritual assistance, right, obsession, disobsession, the relationship between the spiritual world and the physical world. And that's because the main focus of the work of Manoel Philomeno de Miranda is particularly that. So in 1990, Divaldo now creates the project Manoel Philomeno de Miranda that helps train all the spirits group, right, particularly in this area of mediumship. And this is still ongoing. I copied the link there for you guys to see it, but it's still available, right? It's still ongoing, and it's obviously something quite important, right, if you think about it now, today. So Manoel Philomeno, as you can see, is someone who dedicated his whole life to Spiritism while incarnated in his last incarnation, but also particularly focusing on studying and understanding and serving in many Spiritist missions from his spiritual city that we're going to talk about now, and helping us, right? And shout out to everyone that's joining us now. Thank you so much for coming. That's really, really nice to see everyone joining in. All right, so Manoel Philomeno. Okay, so of course you can see that our study is gonna be ongoing for a very long time, and the reason why, because there's many books, right? Authored by Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, as you can see, starting from Os Bastidores da Obsessão in 1970, published by FAB, all the way to In the Way of the World of Regeneration, that was published in 2020 by Editora Leal, right? And this particular book that we're looking at, Planetary Transition, is from 2010. And, it talks about very important events, right, that we're going to see in a second, right? But Manoel Philomeno, his biography focused particularly in ethical responsibility, compassion, forgiveness, as you can see there, right, in the context of mental and emotional distress. Contributes this incredible, detailed, case-based narratives of what's happened in the spiritual world. And I think if you guys, I don't know if you guys had a chance to read the book, but if you read chapter by chapter with me every week, and I really invite you to do that. So every week, we're going to be reviewing maybe one or two chapters. So I'm going to give you a heads up of what we're going to do next week. But if you read carefully, Manuel Filomeno has this incredible way of describing very complex things in almost like a case-based study. So he basically presents case-based studies of individuals throughout the books, and through that, there's this incredible teaching comes through, right? And I think we're going to have a good time going through that. And Teresa logged in here. Say my first hello of the night. Hi, Teresa. Let me type that in here. Why not? Okay, so we got everything there. Let's move along. I don't want to, Teresa and others know me. I can talk a lot about a lot of things. So let's keep focused. Okay. So another introduction here, which is very important. Colônia Redenção. So Colônia Redenção is a spiritual city that is the home base, let's put it this way, of Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. And although we know quite a lot about Nosso Lar, which obviously is incredibly well reported in many books and movies, and we know a lot about it through the work of Manoel Luis. We know less about many other spiritual colonies that are equally important, or have incredible works too. For example, Colônia Redenção. So Manoel Philomeno in the book Sex and Obsession describes incredibly detail, and actually all his books describe a little bit of the city, but in the Sex and Obsession, he describes more details, and details are astounding. So we learned that, for example, Colônia Redenção has an estimated 1 million spirits at any single time. And obviously, this is, like we like to know, this is not up-to-date information probably, right? Because this book is from about 30 years ago. And it's created, now the history is interesting here, and I really want to focus on that because I had a good time learning about it too. So it was created around the time or shortly before the Brazilian independence. Ana Monteiro is here. Hello, how are you doing? Nice to see you guys all jumping in. Thank you for joining. So Colônia Redenção was created around the time of Brazilian independence. And that is really cool is that a lot of spirits that were involved in the independence, in the abolitionist movement, in the First Republic movement, all of those spirits found basically refuge in the spiritual world at Colônia Redenção. So I think I can see it's a very thriving spiritual city if you think that way. And it's responsible for numerous programs of assistance, right? And missions in Umbral, missions on Earth, right? Rescue missions, assistance, spiritual assistance, as you can see described beautifully, right? In the work of Manoel Philomeno, right? Now, another thing that actually I didn't know a lot about, and I think it was very nice for me to read again, is there are numerous different religious movements represented in Colônia Redenção. So we learned, for example, that, in certain, by descriptions of André Luiz particularly, he describes perfectly that, yes, there are places, spiritual cities and places that are specific, right? For certain religions and groups, right? You have some nuns receiving spirits that have that faith. You have, any religion has that. So Colônia Redenção, I think, representing, well, the area of Bahia, which is an incredibly thriving cultural place, also has that mixed cultural background, which I think it's really, really cool, right? And as Manoel Philomeno describes, it mixes both cultures from Africa and from Europe, right? Now, even more interesting than that, in the book Sex and Obsession, Manuel actually describes one of the founders of the spiritual city. It was called Joana Angélica de Jesus, and I didn't know much about the story of Joana Angélica de Jesus. So I said, you know what? Let's do a little research, right? As a good scientist mind, right? Let's try to learn more about this, and I was really impressed because Joana Angélica de Jesus has a very important is a very important figure, right? During the Brazilian independent movement from Portugal, and this pro-independence movement in Bahia. At that time, the Portuguese were attacking Brazilians, right? Um, it was like a revolt, right? So they were actually attacking Brazilians, particularly in Bahia. And there was one period of that history that happened at that time in the Convento da Lapa in Brazil, where what happened is the Portuguese troops were invading, trying to invade and kill the pro-independent people, and they were destroying churches. They were attacking everything, and Joana placed herself in between the troops and the other nuns and the other people, and she basically was killed right during that event, and that created her martyrdom, right? In this pro-independent movement in Brazil. And I think it was it was fabulous to hear that, because that would be exactly who was the founder of the spiritual city, right? That we now know well, called Colina Henderson. Okay. What else? All right. So now we know a little bit about Manoel Philomeno. We know a little bit about Colina Henderson, and some of the kind of background story about kind of what we're going to be talking about. So let's now jump into our planetary transition. Okay. So what is this, right? What is this book about, right? I think one of the things I really like to talk about is exactly the concept of planetary transition, and how is this concept so misunderstood by so many people, not only spiritists, but well-known spiritists, people outside spiritism, like everybody, right? And why don't we actually go straight into the story, right? So let Manoel Philomeno guide us, right, into this beautiful understanding of what planetary transition really means, right? And this book, obviously, by Manoel Philomeno and mediumship of Divaldo, and describes, according to Manoel Philomeno de Miranda, it describes 3 stages of that spiritual work, right? It describes the first is this complex spiritual activities happening during the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004, but also the contribution of the spirits from Colina Redenção to bring and incarnate other spirits that will continue to evolve, continue to improve the overall spiritual family of our planet. In other words, to grow as a planet of regeneration, and also the work for other low spirits that are trying to block that movement, right? So it's a very dynamic process. And you can imagine, like, our planet is changing, we are changing, we're all evolving, right? So André Luiz describes our planet as, and the way he describes it is very nice, because he talks about Earth as like this little several billion year old home that we have, and kind of grows and adapts and changes, right, as we go, and we are all part of it, right, and we are all important, right? So that's what we're going to be talking about, and he's very didactic, right? He describes in 3 specific things we're going to be talking about, right? All right. Any questions for now? Any comments? Because we're going to go straight into the first chapter, the introduction, the prologue, and then to the first chapter that we're going to be talking about today. Okay. All right. So first of all, one thing that's very important for us to remember, right, is that there is a little letter written right in the front here. Let me just open it back here. There's a little quote from Genesis, right? That's in the beginning. And I think the quote is Very appropriate, because the quote from Kardec from the Genesis ends like this: "The present age is one of transition. The members of both generations are mixed together. Standing at the midpoint, we are watching the departure of one and the arrival of the other, and each is already distinguishable by its characteristics that are proper to it." There you go. So nothing that we're talking about here is new to us, really. What we're getting here is more details, right? So, if you have any questions about, you can look at the Genesis, right? So chapter 18, right? Number 27 and 28. And Allan Kardec talks about exactly what we're going to talk about today. And then right after that little quote from Kardec, comes the prologue, right? Which is the part that is written by Manoel Philomeno de Miranda. Okay, let's see. So I summarized things that we need to remember, right? Let's put it this way, like to make it very didactic, make it very, very objective, right? So there's three quotes that I separated here. And if you did read the book, you're probably going to remember this. If you did not read the book, that's totally fine, as you can see, because I bring the key points we're going to be talking about. I'm going to bring all of them, right? So you don't. So this study is really open to everyone, right? So if you don't know anything about it, come and join me, us, right? We're gonna be going through it. And if you did read the book, yes, you're gonna have a lot of in-depth discussions about it. So that's great. So Manoel writes this, right? And this is the introduction prologue, right? The changes being observed at this moment in Earth, he's talking about, are of a moral nature, right? Inviting humans to change their behavior for the better, right? Dropping their bad habits so that paradigms of justice, duty, love, and order may take root, right? So, in other words, what Manoel's saying is that what we're going through is not necessarily what people focus so much, which is like this some sort of magical change that's happening around us. It is a moral change that's happening, right? And it's not happening there, it's happening here, right? This is like, and I think Manuel is so incredibly intelligent to put that right in the introduction of the book. Because, and I'll tell you, you can probably spending more time reading this introduction than the next few chapters, right? Which is very descriptive. This is where the meat is, right? Because really, this is a moral nature, and it's inviting us to change for the better, right? So, but then he continues, right? Unfortunately, this awakening of consciousness has occurred very slowly, right? In stark contrast with the technological and scientific acquisitions over time. In other words, there's a little bit of a discrepancy. Remember, we talked about this all the time of the two wings you need, right? The moral, the science and knowledge, and how we need two things to fly. It's kind of that same concept, right? So there are certain scientific developments happening and some engineering feats and all sorts of things that humankind is able to co-create and develop. But the moral component of it, or this awakening of consciousness, right? That he brings up, it's a little bit on the slow side, right? How do we equalize that? How do we bring this together, right? And I think that is very important, right, for us to think about, right? So then he brings this other concept, which is very interesting. So now this is now going to the Spirit's book, and I copy the quote here, so you don't have to go and read now. But he talks about the law of destruction. What is it? So, question, Spirit's book, is destruction a law of nature, right? And that's the chapter that talks about the divine laws, right? It is necessary for everything to be destroyed in order to be reborn and regenerated. What you call destruction is no more than transformation that is aimed at renewing and improving living beings. So we summarize a lot of things in this book, right? Why is like, let's try to jump in Manuel's mind, right? Why is it putting right up front the law of destruction? Well, because this book talks about a tsunami where 200,000 people discarnated at the same time, right? So he's bringing this incredible contrast between what we see and what we cannot see, right? In other words, I like to do this with my kids, right? It's called the flashlight of attention. So we can choose a flashlight of attention and focus on the suffering, the death, the destruction, right? Or we can open up our flashlight of attention and look at the future and what does this represent globally, right? And that's where the law of destruction comes in. Everything needs to be regenerated, reborn, transformed. It's going to happen. It's inevitable, right? There's different ways of doing it. That's what I was bringing to us with chill, right? There's different ways of getting there, but we are a little bit on the slow side, as he said on the other time. So, and he continues, right? And these quotes are not in the order, so you can read the entire. But I just chose the ones that kind of summarize um, the whole idea, right? So he continues. Then suffering has reached almost unbearable levels. Now, is that true or not? Like, think about it, right? So this is from 2010, but if you think about what we're going through now, it cannot be more accurate, right? Just think about the world. Think about, my friends in the United States are going through, my friends at place of war, my friends in other countries and everywhere around, right? What's happening, right? So much suffering going on, so much stress, a lot of things going on, very dynamic, right? Disregard for laws and ethics, human and animal rights, disregard for human and animal rights, facilitating divine interference so that the great transformation that we all so urgently need may be implemented. So, what is the planetary transition? What is the work of Manoel Philomeno in this book? Is to facilitate this divine interference so that great transformation is going to happen, right? That we so urgently need. There you go. So that is a big summary of what exactly we're going to be talking about for the next, um, how many weeks we're going to be doing this. Yeah, it's about 4 months we're going to be going through this book. Okay. And it is exciting, right? Because we're going to be hearing about something that is incredible, incredible, accurate, and timely, right? Because this is it. This is us now. Right? And that's another thing about Manoel Philomeno that I really like, because he could be so accurate about kind of what we're going through, right? It connects, right? And you can see that through the book. Okay. All right, my dear friends, let's go to the finally let's go to the chapter that we're going to be talking about today, because so far I've just been kind of going around preparing us for this beautiful work, right? And again, if you guys have any comments or suggestions, anything, just type in. I can see his comments coming through. Okay. All right. So he starts the book with a very brief introduction of Colonel Henderson, and we already talked about it because he writes about it extensively in the other books. But, and again, the goal here is not to read the entire book again, but to bring things for us to discuss, right? If you read on the first few pages of the book, chapter 1, called New Pathways, he's going to describe this beautiful transit of spirits between Earth and the colony, which I sometimes try to picture in my head, like picture this scenario in my head, right? Where you can see this constant, interchange, right? Between spiritual world, the spiritual city, the umbral earth, right? And how dynamic that is, right? And we tend not to think much about it. I think, at least I put myself in there, because when I'm living like the physical world and I live this world and I'm working, I'm taking care of the 3 kids and I'm doing all those things, we usually don't think about a lot about the entire complexity of the spiritual world around us. But now when we see the description of someone out there looking the other way around and looking at us, then I think it strikes a chord, right? Because it's very, very intense and dynamic, right? He talks about the specialized centers of study that are in the Colonel Hidden Sound, which are basically schools and universities, just like we described in Osular, right? He also talks about music, which I really like music, but he talks about a choir, composed a kids choir playing Sebastian Bach Mass in B minor, right? And he describes basically seeing the music, the sound as in color, right? That's beautiful. Imagine the music, you're kind of immersed into the music visually, and not only like listening to it, but also seeing it, which I think is a beautiful description of it, right? Just little descriptions that I found very interesting if you want to read in more detail. Now he now introduces to us what is the main theme, right? The main topic of what we're going to be talking about. This tsunami, obviously, that occurred in the Indian Ocean in 2004. And if you guys remember was an incredibly traumatic experience, not only for the 200,000 plus people that were involved, that were actually killed that day, but also the many millions of people that were directly affected by it, and probably billions of people that were indirectly affected by it. So we're not talking only about the discarnate, right? We're talking about the discarnate, the the relationship between the discarnate and the ones that are still incarnated, and the spiritual world, and the repercussion that reverberates the entire planet. So we were, all of us, affected by it, intensely, intensely affected by it. Okay, in one way or another. And if you don't remember what happened at that time, I urge you to go back into like news stories and flashes and try to kind of recapitulate in your mind kind of what we're going to be talking about, because it's critical. Because if you don't have the image of kind of exactly what happened, you don't take the in-depth detail of Manoel Philomeno's description on the spiritual world, right? He also talks about the wave of support of other countries, which was felt in the spiritual world. And I can also remember, and I felt this because I remember when this happened, our entire family was shocked, and we were trying everything we could to help. And I don't remember, and I know we always try to help and things like that, but I don't remember such an intense will and to help other people like we did at that time. So indeed, not only I can read this as description by Manuel, but I can feel it and remember like going through it and how much I felt connected, although it was across the other side of the world, right? So it's a true fact that ignited this wave of support from the entire world, right? Now, Manuel Vermelo, he asks two questions when he's thinking about basically the first chapter is him describing things, going through his thoughts, and then he's going to talk about Oscar, his friend, in a minute. But he asks himself two questions. And these are the two questions that I want to leave today for you to think about. This straightforward two questions, right? How many lifetimes would be necessary to make a planet of regeneration? Right? Again, uh, kind of highlighting the importance of understanding planetary transition as a process, as Manuel told us, that is here and constant, right? As a process, right? So, how many times, how many lifetimes, or how many incarnations we're going to be involved into this until we actually there, right? So, he doesn't answer that question, and I think he does it intentionally because he wants us to think about it, right? And how much pain would have to afflict people's hearts for there to be a change? That's the next. So there's, you have to take them in a sequence, right? So first of all, how many times do I have to do this, right? And second time, how much pain we're going to have to go through to finally say, I give up, right? We're gonna change, right? And now, if you go back to his history of Manuel, that's perfect because remember, he got into Spiritism because of a health problem he had, right? So that's connection. That's true. That's feeling that coming out of him, right? And you can grab it, like you can connect to it, right? Because I ask myself the same thing. I don't know about you guys, but that's probably one of the questions that I ask myself all the time. How, what else, what are we gonna do to move this thing, right? And how much more we're gonna have to go through, how much what, just put that clarity in our minds of how much can we do ourselves, right, for this to be implemented, right? and don't lose faith and don't lose hope, right? Because that's tied together, right? So those are the little topics that I brought from that first few pages of the book, and I think it's important to talk about, right? Now we're going to go to the second part of that first chapter, which is just a few pages long, but um, um, yeah, it is. That's right. Too many reincarnations, apparently way more pain. Yes, I think that's I think that's the summary of what Manoel Philomeno brought to us, right? It's like as Teresa is saying here, as we can see the story of Manoel Philomeno, that's projecting to us. That's kind of where we're getting at, right? So we're still chugging, we're still going, but going at a slow pace and not committing, right? It seems like we're hesitating to commit to the spiritual life and to commit to improving, and right. So yeah, that's right. It is. I think we're still kind of working on it, work in progress, right? Um, Now, so the second part now of the chapter one, which is very interesting. Now, he's going to describe to us a very important person in this book, right? His name is Oscar, his friend, right? And the way he introduces Oscar is really cool, because what he does is he describes Oscar, he describes the city, the place we are, he describes that, and then he describes Oscar kind of the mental screen projection, right? So this projection of the mental screens, basically, Oscar is he's crying, he's thinking about his life, and he's projecting around them mental screens. Now think about it. Like, I know we don't think about it all the time, but can you imagine that we can have mental screen projections in the spiritual world, right? That's all we have, my friends. We can go to the medium's book, we can go to the spirit's book, we can go to Andrea Luis, and we can have beautiful descriptions of what these mental screens are, right? And how spirits are seen in the spiritual world based on what they think, what we think. So in the spiritual world, when we look at someone, we see a projection, living projection of thoughts. So thoughts are real, thoughts are matter, like they're physical. You can almost touch them, you can feel them, right? In the spiritual world, more than that, they actually show around us. So you cannot hide. In the spiritual world, that does not happen, right? In the physical world, sometimes we can kind of maybe try very hard to hide things, but not in the spiritual world, my friend. So you have to be uh, very careful and thoughtful about that, right? Um, but that's exactly it. So he sees his childhood memories, he sees his thoughts projected around him, showing his hometown in the Alps, right? He was born in the Austrian city, in the Austrian Alps in Tyrol, and then moved to Vienna, right, Oscar? And when he comes back from that moment of concentration and thoughts, then he starts to describe his story to Manuel Filomeno. And as we can probably imagine, it's a very challenging story, right? He was born in a Jewish family, but he was allowed to actually study the Catholic Church, right? So he did introduce himself to idea of Christianity and Jesus, and he liked it, and he kept that his entire life. Even now in the spiritual world, he still loves Jesus, as he says, which is very interesting. So the family was victim of the Holocaust at that time. His parents were killed in a gas chamber in Auschwitz, and then he was spared for labor. He was 16 years old at that time, and he was transferred to another concentration camp, as you can see here in the bottom right side, this kind of Sobibor camp, also in Poland. And the top one, it's the Auschwitz camp, which is also in Poland, both of them. And needless for us to describe exactly in details what happened in those camps. We know the history of the Holocaust, but it's interesting to see a perspective of the spirit that went through it, right? And that's what Oscar is doing to us. So Oscar, after he went through all of that, he graduated in medicine at the University of Vienna, and he worked as a missionary, combating diseases, suffering. He continued attending the synagogue, but still loved Jesus. That is exactly what Corona Redenção is, right? The city. because this spiritual city brings all different types of spirits, right, in unison together, right? That's beautiful, right? So it would be it's really nice to see that there are places in the spiritual world where this community close to us, of course, evolved spirits will have all that sorted out, but even in spiritual colonies close to surface, we still have some places where you have true respect for differences and different thoughts, but still working together for God. Sorry, so that's perfect, right? That's a very interesting concept. So he does live in a Jewish spirit community. Remember, these communities that have particular faith backgrounds, right? But he was called in the mission to come to Coronel Henderson to help with this rescue mission that Manoel Philomeno de Miranda is going to go and Oscar is going to go, right? So when Oscar says, and Manoel Philomeno says, we were to return to our beloved Mother Earth for special activities in accordance with the program prepared by the benefactors of our community, right? And they end, right, with this the title of the chapter, which is like new pathways. Like, it's like a preparation for a new mission, right, that they're going through. So I almost felt reading this chapter, and I don't know how you guys felt about it, but I almost felt like, the calm before the storm, right? Where you have there's a lot of things going on. There's spiritual communications coming from higher levels of the spiritual world. There are spirits preparing themselves for a mission that they're almost ready to go to roll. There's some sort of a disaster happening close to them on the earth. So there's all of these things happening at the same time, right? And they all know they're going to step into a very challenging, complicated process that they're going to help a lot of people that are suffering, right? And they have to do it as Manoel Philomeno says. This is a mission organized by spirituality in the name of God, and they're going to be doing this to help people. But at the same time, you can almost feel that air feels like they're going to step into something big, right? That's the new pathways. In other words, they're all excited, they're all ready to go, they're all ready to go through this entire book, right, with us, right? So that was a perfect introduction for us to what are we going to go into in more details now. So next chapters now, as you're going to see, we're going to be talking about the preparation, right? In chapter 2, we're going to have a new visitor, right? With a little prayer and talking about a special visitor. And then in chapter 3, we're going to have the revelation message that is also very important. So now next week, Monday night, we're going to be doing chapter 2 and chapter 3, right, of Planetary Transition. And again, for all of you that joined us a little bit after, we're doing an ongoing study of the works of Manoel Philomeno de Miranda through the mediumship of Divaldo Franco, and we're starting with Planetary Transition. Today we finished the introduction and chapter 1. Next week we're going to do chapter 2 and chapter 3. And if you have a chance to read, that would be great, because we can have a more in-depth discussion about the topics. I want it to be interactive. I want you guys to ask questions, chat, comments, anything that you find, maybe fun or interesting or challenging or you don't understand. This is exactly how this thing should go, right? We should actually be talking about things. So if you guys have any comments, I hope you guys enjoyed our conversation today. And if you guys are okay, we're gonna end our presentation very soon. But again, thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Again, this is the first of this series of new study that we have in the Toronto Spirit Society, and in partnership with Kardec Radio. So I'd like to thank also all the people at Kardec Radio, Vanessa, right, for having us this opportunity to do this combined study, which I think may be very helpful in the future if you're doing studies on Manoel Philomeno. Yes, thanks, Teresa. Thank you for joining. I'm really happy to see you and Anna, right? And Alicia is here too. Send a little thumbs up. Yeah, I got a thumbs up there too. Yes, thank you all. Yeah, I know Teresa, right? I didn't know. Oh, Isa's here too. Oh, Isa's logged in as Toronto Spirit Society. Hi, Isa. Nice to see you too. Oh, it's so nice to see you guys. Thank you. Yeah. So I know it's interesting because all I knew before stepping into this, obviously I knew about Manuel Filomena's books, but bringing together the story and the books and everything, I think gave me a whole new dimension. That's why I was excited to do this, because it gave me a whole new dimension um, of kind of what is this about, an obsession is obsession in mediumship, right? Oh, Eve is there too. Hi, Eve. Say everybody. Michelle. Thank you, everyone. All right, everyone. So thank you so much for joining us, and for all of us here. And may God bless our night and our week. And we're gonna be joined again next Monday night at 10 with chapter 2 and chapter 3 of a beautiful book, Planetary Transition. Right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night. Bye.